Hello and welcome to today's webcast with Ranger4. My name is Helen Beal. I'm the head of DevOps here at Ranger4. So today I'm going to be talking with you about our DevOps LiftOff Workshop. We developed the workshop to help organisations that weren't sure where to start with DevOps or wanted a way of kicking off a transformation programme by getting a number of people in the same room and on the same page and a common kind of documented way of thinking about DevOps and their approach. The workshop is a day long. We don't charge for it, so it's free of charge. We generally deliver it on site with our customers. We are later on this month, we're doing one in IBM Southbank location, which is actually going to be one-to-many, so it'll be an audience of different people from different companies. But generally, we do it on customer site. We recommend that the group for the Liftoff workshop is somewhere between 4 and 12 attendees. And those attendees could be from all sorts of parts of your business or your IT business. So not necessarily just your development and operations people, but also your InfoSec people, DBAs, architects, perhaps even some of your line of business people. I'm sure some of the people on the call have heard other terms banded around, things like DevBizOps, BizDevOps, that try and reflect the fact that DevOps is really being driven by business requirements and businesses need to move faster and deliver higher quality apps faster to their customers or their end users and improve their end user experience. So it's up to you really who you bring to the workshop. As you can see here, here's the standard agenda for the Liftoff workshop. We do vary or customise this with people as people sometimes require some or more focus on some of the different exercises. You can see the exercises are generally 20 minutes to 40 minutes long, so it's a really busy day. We basically facilitate the day and drive the exercises and try and keep to schedule with you. As we deliver the workshop, the facilitator is also completing a document with the results of these exercises. So at the end of the workshop, you get a deliverable, which is your workshop report, and we'll go into a bit more detail on the specific deliverables that you get within that report. So there's 9 exercises that we follow. As I said, the group is normally 4 to 12 people, and the first exercise is a flip chart exercise, and we do it with the whole group. So typically we'll have hopefully some sort of kind of round table that makes it quite easy to debate. So not a kind of classroom style room, but a debate room. So the facilitator will be at the front, and we'll start trying to define DevOps and what DevOps is for you, for your organisation. So we can do this a couple of ways, and we'll always do a prep call with you before we deliver the workshop. So we'll have some guidance from the people that have booked the workshop on how they want it to run and how much they want us to kind of drive the discussion or drive debate. So we can start talking about trying to help you define DevOps, or we can just throw that open to the room. Now, if we're doing more of a kind of let's try and define DevOps and then decide how to allocate that or how to customize that definition for yourselves, we'll start by talking about what drives DevOps. So DevOps has really come about because IT has become more strategic and mission critical to organizations than ever before, with the increasing capability of particularly internet and web technologies and the increasing rich experiences that we can offer to our end users. And what that means is we have businesses that are putting a lot of pressure on the IT development teams to innovate new things to take to market. So we have development teams that are very focused on making changes and have lots of customers now. I'm sure many of you on the call are the same, that you've embraced agile development. You're producing lots and lots of iterations of software. You're doing sprints, and you're trying to do multiple releases quite fast and trying to keep a very dynamic experience for your end users. So we have the developers on one side that are very concerned about getting this innovation to market and wanting to make lots of change to the systems. And then on the other hand, we have the IT operations teams who are responsible for infrastructures that over several decades now in established enterprises have evolved to be very sophisticated and therefore quite fragile. So the operations teams are primarily concerned with the stability of those systems. And they possibly don't want too much change happening because change is quite dangerous. Change is quite risky. So that has caused an element of conflict between these two departments, which over the years as well, most people have organisationally created these departments quite separately. So they're quite siloed. So I go and visit customers where development are on one side of the corridor and operations are on the other, or they're on different floors. And that's very, very common. So DevOps is really about trying to bring those two siloed organisations together and to try and eliminate that conflict that we have observed. So Gene Kim, who many of you will have heard of, is one of the foremost speakers on the subject of DevOps. He did a very interesting presentation, I think it was at last year's Puppet Conf, on how to sell DevOps internally, so how to talk to management teams and budget holders about why DevOps is important and why some money should be put aside to make a DevOps transformation happen. And in that particular presentation, he talks about stress and burnout in InfoSec, in particular IT staff, and how some psychologists have monitored this and noted that it is equivalent to some war veterans, that how hard these people are working and how much conflict and pressure they are under in their working environment. So hopefully none of you are feeling that stressed at work, but I'm sure it's very uncommon for me to go onto any customer site. In fact, it never happens that everything's working perfectly. There's always some room for improvement, and certainly everyone is feeling the pressure to do more with less. This is my favourite DevOps definition, if you like. It's from Jesse Robbins, who's one of the founders of Opscode, who makes Chef. I think I like it because it's really simple. It's almost kind of haiku-esque or quite poetic. And it's basically saying, let's not get caught up in all this nonsense, all of this blaming people and getting caught up on outages and war rooms and failure and all the stress that might be happening. And let's just really focus on getting this innovation to market and making our customers very happy with what we're delivering. This is a somewhat more verbose definition that we like to use in the workshop. And again, we're just trying to get to the bottom of the state an organisation is in, and how tense and how pressured and how under demand they might feel, and how they view DevOps for themselves. This one I like, this really summarises what IT is allowing us to do, beat the pants off the competition. IT gives many, many businesses, in fact, most businesses in the world today, the opportunity to do more than just survive. It enables people to thrive. And if you don't fully embrace IT, and arguably if you don't fully embrace DevOps, there's a chance that you're going to be left behind and your competitors will beat you. This definition or quote I like from James at Puppet Labs, because my background is primarily on the sales or commercial side of IT, and I quite enjoy the winces that even sales should be thrown into the mix too. Now, salespeople, I know in many organisations, are quite renowned for doing things like making promises to customers to deliver systems that might not yet exist, and perhaps doing over-promising. So I think it is important that those people that do interface with the customers and do have the conversations with customers about what they'd like to see in terms of capability can interface back to cleanly and with good communication and good expectation setting to the people that are going to be responsible for actually developing that capability. And this one from Gene kind of, nicely summarises again. So DevOps refers to the emerging professional movement that advocates collaborative working relationships between development and IT operations, resulting in the fast flow of planned work while simultaneously increasing the reliability, stability, and resilience of the production environment. So I think that nicely summarises it. And, I like that Gene talks about it being a professional movement. So, DevOps isn't a methodology per se in the way that ITIL is. It isn't a tool, although automation is part of what you can do with DevOps. So I think that's quite a nice phrase. I'm not sure it's emerging anymore. The phrase DevOps was originally coined by Patrick Dubois on Twitter as a hashtag over 5 years ago now. I think all of the analysts are producing lots and lots of work on DevOps and how to do it. Puppet Labs are producing State of DevOps reports annually and have been doing for several years now. So I would say not emerging. I'd say it's here, although, and we'll come on to a maturity scale in a minute, I think many organisations have an opportunity to do much more with DevOps still. So the second part, or the second exercise of the workshop, is about baselining metrics. And at this point, we split the group up. So as I said, the group will normally be 4 to 12 people. So that first exercise, we've now defined DevOps for your organisation. Hopefully we've got a nice crisp definition of what DevOps means for your particular organisation and what you're going to try and do with it. The next step is to start baselining metrics. So John Wills, another famous guru in DevOps, coined the acronym CAMS to, again, summarize what DevOps is all about. So in CAMS, the letters stand for culture, automation, metrics, and sharing. And some people like to put an L in there for lean as well, so they make it CALMS or CLAMS. But metrics are absolutely essential to DevOps. It's really important to have them, to know what you're aiming for and to be able to measure and report success. So the first line is like, based on where you are, then we can start identifying places that you might want to go, and then start measuring your progress against those goals. So this is the DevOps maturity scale that I just mentioned a moment ago. So at the start of this exercise, the first thing we try and do around baseline is try and establish where your organisation is on this maturity scale. Now, the maturity scale is a quite lean way of looking at DevOps. We do another piece of consulting called a DevOps maturity assessment, which is a 10-day consulting engagement, 2 days on site, interviewing various characters within your organisation to get a view of where you are today across culture, interactions, and automation. And it analyses lots and lots of pieces. But what we've tried to do is summarise what we've learned through doing these maturity assessments with customers and try to summarise what we think the steps of DevOps maturity are. It's a good side to have a lot of debate, because when we try and map people on this, people might say, oh, well, actually, we've written quite a lot of scripts, but we're a bit behind on test automation, or actually, we've been cross-functional teams for quite a while, but we think we've got quite a lot of other cultural change to do. But it's a good discussion to have. So that's the first part of this exercise. And the second part, when we're split up into the groups, so if it's a room of 12, for example, we'll ask the room to split up into either 3 groups of 4 or 4 groups of 3. And we ask the room to split up into groups. So it's quite an important point, because in the morning, when we split up into groups, we let the groups naturally form themselves. And this can tell us quite a lot about the natural working groups, perhaps silos, perhaps the word cliques is perhaps a little bit high school, but we can already see and learn something about the culture and the working practices by asking people to do that. When we come back from lunch, what we do is we actually make the groups up ourselves. So we observe in the morning and see which groups naturally occur, and then we kind of throw that up in the air and have different groups in the afternoon and see how that works. So the second part of this, the second exercise about baselining metrics, we then give each of these small groups a templated table. So I filled this one in so you can have some examples, but we'll actually, on the left, so we normally leave these metric types, so frequency of release, defect, outage, elapsed time to release, time to resolve defect, and MTTR, or mean time to recovery. We'll normally leave them filled out, and then we'll ask the groups separately to fill out how often they're doing these things, what the current rate is, and what a target rate might be. Now, yesterday we were doing a breakfast briefing and we were going through a Gartner model called 7 Steps to Doing DevOps. And the second or third step, and this is a document from Ronnie Colville, I'll try and remember to send a link when I send out the slides of this. Ronnie talks about change the metrics, and we had a very big debate about this, and it was very interesting yesterday. And I think we're talking about business metrics. Now, arguably, these metric types that we've got here are actually IT metrics, but what I can't do on a prep call for a number of customers is know exactly what each business's business metrics look like. So, for example, I work with some credit card banks, so their business metrics might be number of applications that day. I work with an organisation that is responsible for running auctions to sell cars. So they might have business metrics around the number of auctions or the number of vehicles sold that day. So when we do the workshop with you, we'll provide this matrix pre-filled with these kind of IT business metrics, but we'll also ask you to think about specific business metrics that you can report on as well. So at that point, we started baselining where you are, and we started doing a little bit of work. You remember that 4th column on that matrix we were just looking at was around what your targets might be. So we'll spend some more time, again, in the smaller groups, looking at future state. And for this piece or this exercise, what we do is provide you with a number of keywords. And we ask you to come up with your own keywords and or use the keywords that you've been provided with and come up with a description of what you would like your DevOps culture to look like. So when we do future state work with customers, there's kind of this cultural future state, and there's also often a future state where people might say, actually, our desired future state is, for example, continuous delivery is quite a common one, a full end-to-end DevOps tool chain that takes our software from idea to production as seamlessly as possible. But for this exercise, we're asking you to think specifically about culture. And this slide I first used in a presentation where we were looking very closely at DevOps goals and rewards. And what we were trying to do was set, again, an expectation of what the future state might look like, and then set some goals around that and goals around the metrics. And we looked at SMART goals, and we'll come back to SMART goals in one of the exercises in a minute. But we also talked about motivation, and therefore looking at motivation and tying the rewards for hitting these goals to the motivational types. And we're going to come back to the motivational types shortly as well. I just want you to notice the 3 light green bubbles here. When I first wrote this slide, myself and the consultant I was delivering the presentation with had quite a discussion about these, because it was felt originally that these particular words might turn off some of the audience. They might find them a bit fluffy or a bit hippie, and particularly larger established enterprises might not like these words. Now, these words I took from an HR video, a Join Our Company video that I found on the careers page of a company called Atlassian, which many of you will be familiar with. They make Jira and Bamboo and things like that. Originally from Australia, now West Coast based, very successful open source type company. And these are words that they use about their company culture and what it's like to work there. And I'll come back to it when we talk about motivations, why those 3 are particularly interesting. So the 4th exercise in the morning, and this is a 40-minute exercise, so you can imagine there's only so much of a business case we can write in 40 minutes, but we have some business case templates that we use with you, so which are effectively an extension of the metrics matrix that you just saw in the exercise 2, the baselining exercise. So what we do is we start looking at the metrics like frequency of release or time elapsed to release, and start assigning resource numbers and resource values and resource times against them, and then we can start estimating the savings if you hit the targeted metrics that you wanted in that matrix. So, and again, the same for all of your business metrics. So if we start thinking about your business metrics is currently you have 100 applications for your credit card a day, and you want that to be 1,000 credit card applications a day, we can then work out how much business each credit card application is worth to you, and therefore what the value of increasing that rate would be. So the 5th exercise, so by now the teams will have broken for lunch. We're coming up to an exercise where there's a self-assessment around the SCARF motivation that I haven't talked to you about yet, but I will in a minute. But I alluded to it a moment ago when I talked about the pale green speech bubbles in that last slide. So we'll have sent you a link prior to the workshop asking if you could complete the self-assessment. It takes about 5 minutes. In fact, I'm going to show you some of it in a moment. However, not everyone always manages to get that done before we come on site, so we'll ask people to complete it during the lunch hour. I also mentioned earlier, when we get back from lunch, what we'll do is we'll break into smaller teams again, but the facilitator will decide what teams those are going to be. So we're going to mix up the group and mix up the characters in the room and do a different view of the goals. Sorry, a view of the lessons. The other thing we will have done just before lunch is we will have summarised each group's progress through those last exercises that we went through, and we will compare what the answers look like. Okay, so exercise 5, the first exercise after lunch, is all about setting goals. So we have a couple of SMART goals examples. I'm sure everyone on the call is very familiar with the concept of SMART goals. This particular example is about number of releases. This one is quite interesting. I wrote this SMART goal quite a while ago now, and actually the way that we work with customers now when we're talking about deployment automation has changed quite a lot. So here you can see I'm talking about increasing the volume of releases from once a fortnight to I think once a day. Sorry, I've got my control panels just in front of that particular word. So yes, to once a day. Actually, what we're talking to customers about now is not not monitoring the rate of releases in that way, but creating systems that allow for things like on-demand deployment. So every time an iteration of new code is ready, it can get through the route to live, get fully automated, tested, signed off, and put into production. And that's how the DevOps unicorns, so the startups that have been able to build their IT teams from scratch in the last 5 or so years. So the people like Google and LinkedIn, that's how they do multiple releases a day. They have systems that allow for that, so they're not waiting for lots of people to perform lots of manual tasks or run some scripts to get the code out there. Now, this SMART goal I quite enjoy. There's I'd like to say a deliberate mistake in it. The first time I wrote this slide, actually, it wasn't a deliberate mistake, but it was quite quickly picked up with the team I went through that day. But the mistake, if you can't see it, is that we're putting responsibility on the testing team here for reducing the number of defects. And of course, the testing team can never really be responsible for the amount of defects that are appearing. They can only ever be responsible for the amount of defects that are being resolved and the rate at which they're being resolved. But this gets the team starting to think about the kind of goals that can be set. And we've got, again, some kind of pre-built templates that we provide to each team with a number of gaps in the statement and a number of words that they can choose to put in the statement. So we start building some SMART goals together. Okay, so the sixth exercise, I was talking about this one a moment ago. The sixth exercise is around motivation. So we know that if we can understand ourselves better in the way that we react to things at work, that we're probably an easier person to work with. And we know that if we can understand the people around us and how they're motivated and how they react to certain situations, that probably helps us take a step back from potentially kind of flammable situations and maybe take a look at something and collaborate better and remember that we're all on the same side and go for the same goal together. So SCARF is an acronym for the 5 areas of social motivation that were identified in a book called The Brain at Work. And I will, again, endeavour to remember to send you a link to this afterwards, along with the link to the self-assessment that we're about to look at. And what The Brain at Work says is that neuroscientifically it's been identified that the way that we behave at work and the way that we respond to positive and negative things happening at work can be largely dependent on our core social motivation. And SCARF gives us 5 core social motivations that the theory says we are one of these. So the S is for status, the C is for certainty, the A for autonomy, the R for relatedness, and the F is for fairness. So the self-assessment that we ask the members of the team to complete is just here. Just give me a moment. Just here. So we probably won't do the whole thing. It does only take sort of 5 or so minutes, but you can see I just need to quickly fill out this. I haven't spelt my name wrong. That's not a huge issue. And then we'll say okay. Actually, we'll be there today. It doesn't really matter. And we will write. So these are the kind of questions. Now, I have my reservations about the self-assessment. I think it is useful to get us thinking about these sort of questions. I never agree with the results I get. I think that I'm primarily motivated by autonomy. I know that if negative things happen to me at work, the kind of things I don't like, so autonomous people, for example, don't really like to be micromanaged, that triggers a response in me that feels quite uncomfortable. So I'm getting some nasty brain chemicals coming out. But if something happens to me at work where, for example, I decide to do an event and deliver the event and it's very popular, I get very good feedback, that makes me feel marvellous. And I'm getting lots of dopamine, oxytocin and serotonin rewards in my brain from that experience. But these are the kind of questions that were asked in the self-assessment by this online tool. So several members of the team I'm part of are in disagreement and they come to me for help to get started. Do I clarify what they expect of me or speak to both parties separately to hear their point of view or look for a solution that will suit all parties? I try and solve it without talking to anyone or wish I was in charge so I could tell them what to do. Now, I don't think anybody's going to really thinks that's going to be the right answer, but I think this self-assessment thinks that's the right answer. So I'm going to pop that in there for now. As you can see, this gives us lots of things to debate around. So the second question, someone's late for a meeting with you, what's your most likely response? So again, you're annoyed because you worked hard to be on time. You make sure you have the timetable in place correct. It's probably what most people would do. So we won't complete the whole assessment now because it'll take probably a little bit too long while we're on the call, but that's the next question or the next exercise that the group goes through. Then what we do when we have our results is we share our results with the team. So we do two things really. We say, this is my result and I agree with it or I don't agree with it. It said I was, for example, status driven and I don't feel that's me. And then we ask the team around to also give that person their opinion on whether they thought that was an accurate identification of their primary social motivation. So it gives us quite a nice debate to have around the team. The seventh exercise is all around flow and the theory of constraints. And if you remember earlier when we were looking at the definitions, there was one particular definition from Gene Kim where he started talking about things like planned work. And hopefully people on the call have heard of or have read the Phoenix Project, which is the novel about DevOps that Gene Kim co-authored with George Spafford and Kevin Beer. And in it, they talk very much about this flow and the theory of constraints and things like, any improvement not made at a bottleneck is just an illusion, because effectively you're either creating a vacuum after the bottleneck or rushing work towards the next bottleneck. So this next exercise that we do, exercise 7, is we play a little game called Feature Ban. So for those that aren't familiar on the call, there is a thing called Kanban. It was originally invented by Toyota in their factories, and it was a way of ensuring that work or the process of building a car happened as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible by understanding the workloads on various workstations and keeping that work flowing smoothly. So you can see on the back of this slide here, the picture is showing you the kind of chart that we use in Kanban. In fact, Feature Ban starts with us providing a blank chart to each of the teams playing it, and they decide what kind of states to put in at the top. So it would be typically things like start and end, and then in the middle, things like dev, test, and release, for example. So we fill out that. Then we ask the teams to decide what they're going to build. So it could be a house or it could be a rocket ship. So we ask people to come up with an idea of what they're going to build. And then each person in the teams comes up with features. So if it was going to be a house, a feature might be a door and a room and a carpet and a window. And those features all get written on the little post-it notes like you can see here. And then we play a game. We play 3 rounds of the game, and we're basically looking at moving these features through the workflow. We're looking at how features get blocked, how you can demote features, finish features, delete features. So it's quite a fun little game. It gives everyone a taste of Kanban. And it can be Kanban, something that a lot of people choose as a methodology to incorporate into their DevOps transformation. So the 8th penultimate exercise is about building a software manufacturing pipeline. So for this exercise, we have a look at where you are at today in terms of which pieces of this quite linear, I'll give you, visualization of a pipeline or a tool chain might look like. So we start trying to identify your maturity across all of these pieces. And again, the DevOps maturity assessment that I mentioned, that goes into this in a great deal more detail. So we really drill down and fully understand the process maturity behind all of these areas, as well as your tools implementation maturity. And then once we've done that, we'll model a tool chain with you on the board. So we'll start, we have some kind of pre-printed logos of things like Puppet and Chef and Jenkins and Urban Code and Quality Center and Remedy and things like that. So we paste all of them up on the board and we try and identify how mature your DevOps tool chain is and what kind of areas you'd like to make improvements on and which where you might have bottlenecks and where you might want to focus your next few projects. And then finally, we work with you to build a DevOps roadmap. So this is an example of how our DMA works actually, but what we're trying to do in this particular exercise is this right-hand set of blocks. So try to identify the pieces of work that will be the DevOps transformation project for you, that constitute is the word I was looking for, that will constitute your DevOps transformation project. So there may be some reorganization or some cultural change you need to enact. There may be some process analysis that you need to look at in a bit more detail, and perhaps some automation tooling that you want to look at implementing and then rolling out. It may be that you did identify a desired future state around continuous delivery, so we can have that as a stated overall goal of the project. So once we have the roadmap we have completed the day's exercises. So just to reiterate, those are the 9 exercises in the standardised LiftOff workshop. So we just went through them one by one. So we started off by defining DevOps. We then established your baseline metrics. We then worked with you to visualize your future state. We then had 40 minutes of writing a high-level business case using the metrics matrix from exercise 2 and looking at your target goals and the resource costs associated, or the revenue gains associated with the business metrics that you had established. After exercise 4, the group breaks for lunch. We asked people to complete the SCARF self-assessment if it hadn't already been completed. And after lunch, when we come back, we change the group numbers around. And then we work through the final set of exercises, the 5 exercises. So the definition of your SMART DevOps goals, the SCARF self-assessment and understanding how we're motivated at work and what makes us happy and what makes us unhappy. Then we played Feature Band, the Kanban game. Then we looked at what your software pipeline looks like today and what you might want it to look like in future. And finally, we tried to roll all of that up into a set of projects that could constitute your DevOps Transformation program. So the overall deliverables of the LiftOff workshop, as I said earlier, your facilitator has a report framework that they'll be working on, like a report template that they'll work on throughout the workshop, completing it with the various outputs from your groups and your teams. So at the end of the day, you'll be given a soft copy, a PDF copy of your report. But specifically in the report, you'll see your own DevOps vision statement, the collection of the metrics that have been collected from your small teams and agreed upon and discussed. This draft business case that we have established with you using the matrix metrics, the goals that your teams have stated using the SMART goal templates that we will have provided, and finally the roadmap and the actions to take you to your next DevOps piece of your transformation. So that's it. That is the DevOps LiftOff workshop. In the follow-up email that I'll send you later on this afternoon, I'll send you a link to a form where you can request your own workshop. As I said, it's a one-day workshop. We deliver it on site. We don't charge for it, and it's for somewhere between 4 to 12 people. And those people will generally be not just from your IT development and IT operations teams, but also from your InfoSec teams, your DBAs, your architects, and even your business lines. You will get an email from me, but if anyone is viewing this webcast and has not participated in it, if you want to get hold of us, you can email us at this address, hello@ranger4.com. So thank you everybody for your time. We're just over the half hour, so that's quite good. I'm just going to see if we've got any questions from anybody. I can't see any questions there. So I'm going to assume there are none, and I'm going to thank everybody for their time and coming along today. And as I say, I will email you shortly the recording of this webcast, along with a couple of links that I've mentioned during the course of it. So thank you again, and goodbye.